Welcome, everybody, to Too Legit to Crit, a tabletop role-playing podcast hosted by the human equivalent of Justin's Dice Rolls.
Wow. Just going in deep with that one. Okay.
Well, you called me out last week, so
mean.
I had to kind of, amp it up a tiny bit.
I mean, again, you're not wrong, because my dice rolls are terrible and we are terrible human beings. So I get your point.
So my name is John Santana.
I'm still Justin. That hasn't changed.
All right, still Justin. Should we start calling you like Steel Justin?
Am I like a Pokemon now?
Yeah, I was gonna either. I mean, I don't like Justin Steele because that just sounds porny.
Yeah, it does. It very much does. Or like 80s action film.
Justin Steele.
Stars in.
So, what have you been up to this week, buddy?
I have been up to absolutely nothing. I've been trying to get my life in order, primarily. I did have a bit of fun chatting to a relatively young player, good friend of ours' child, who has been involved in their D&D club at their school. And we were just going through like puzzle ideas and concepts and stuff. So that was quite fun. But other than that, absolutely nothing.
That's fair. Getting your life in order is always sort of a good thing.
I don't want to go that far. What about yourself? What have you been up to?
Well, I have been inputting a stupid amount of data into Obsidian, because I am slowly getting my Delta Green campaign prepared for when I'm ready to run that. So essentially, I'm kind of going through the agent's handbook and going through that. But also, I downloaded a new system that at some point we have to try.
Okay, so this is one that's going on the list, is it?
It is definitely going on the list. I downloaded it day before yesterday, and it is called Bind.
Okay.
Right, and Bind stands for Bind is Not Dungeons and Dragons. Which I love the name, and here's the interesting thing about it. It is an open source RPG.
Interesting.
And, I would love to tell you all about it, but I am nowhere near clever enough.
Also interesting.
So, we have a guest on the show today. It is the person who actually, brought this out into the world. Malin Freeborn.
Oi. How we doing?
Oh, now I see why you said I'd have a lot of questions once I found out what he does.
Exactly. Welcome to the show, Malin.
Cheers for having me on, guys.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming on and, classing up the place a tiny bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can go that far. You got high hopes, don't you?
So, you and I interacted slightly on Mastodon, and I posted something about, we were looking for guests in the sort of tabletop role-playing space, and you came forward and kind of, introduced yourself. And I started kind of watching some of the videos that you've got up. I was definitely invested in this this open source RPG concept, because although the concept itself of open source is not new to me, how that applies to role-playing games is. So would you like to tell us about yourself and talk to us about Bind?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I'm a bit boring, but I'll go on about Bind all you like. So the basic intuition was just trying to flip this thing in his head. I think a lot of people might have heard the famous article on fantasy heartbreakers, where somebody makes a fantasy RPG, which is basically like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's got a couple of interesting ideas, like a few cool monsters, or maybe it's got a really good magic system. It's never Vancian magic like D&D. Everyone hates it. But anyway, the idea behind this article is it's just heartbreaking that people pour their souls into this, and the end result is not really that good. And I just wanted to flip this in his head. I got I felt a bit resentful about this article, because when you look at it, you're comparing Dungeons and Dragons, which is made by a team of some hundreds of people at the least. And they got like multiple editors and typographers and and all this other stuff, and you're comparing it to one person's output over, and maybe you take a couple of years to write a book or something.
Yeah.
So firstly, the comparison's not fair, but then I thought, okay, it's fair in the sense of you need to pick a game, you do need to rate these things. And if something's a bit rubbish, there's no use saying, well, it's rubbish, but there's a good reason. It's still rubbish, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so the inversion came when I started to think, what if people weren't doing this again and again with their own things? What if we didn't recreate it? What if you thought of it as like just swap a bit? And we're starting to see a bit of that already. Like Vaults of Varn, it's a fairly rare thing, but it's basically a copy of Knave. And the only reason it exists is because this creator could copy Knave, make the adjustments they want, and now it's really easy to produce. And Knave was a copy of Into the Odd and a little bit of Cairn. And again, those things are open source. You could just copy paste the text. And then you only have the barrier of typography, publishing, editing the things that you've changed, and playtesting just the new rules that you're putting in.
Yeah, I mean, only. Yeah.
So it's still a pretty big barrier.
Yeah.
So
I guess like the easiest comparison to make would be like trying to compare an indie video game to like a AAA title from EA, right?
Right. I suppose so. In those cases, people do tend to do both. I think that's less common with RPGs. You've got much more limited time, so you want to do just the best you can do, and also it takes so long to get into a system. A computer game, you just turn on, you expect to be spoon-fed. Nobody wants to read 3 books to see which ones are the all right ones. So the basic thought here is, what if we lower the barrier to entry even more, and you literally put up the source files publicly, so anyone can jump in and go, like, I've had somebody fix one spelling mistake. Or when I asked for an artist to put things, to put a couple of pictures in, he put in the pictures directly into the book. So, it's just there. And any artist could, in theory, get a full copy of the book, put their picture in, and the entire thing, like, it won't need to be redone. You won't need to redo the index because it's all automated. It's all just a whole bunch of text. You write in the text, compile it, export to PDF as you normally do, and the book comes out the other side. So the idea is it's really, really easy to modify, or at least as easy as I could make it.
I find it fascinating. I do, because the whole concept of people adding things to an RPG is something that we are kind of seeing in the major releases. However, they do it in a very sort of confined way. Where it's, okay, we're releasing a playtest, give us your feedback, whatever sticks. From what I'm gathering, Bind is just taking that to the extreme and just kind of going, this is the system. However, if there's anything you want to change, there you go. It's all yours.
Yeah, so this is taking it to the extreme. It's a little like the other famous article on, I don't know, has anyone ever read The Cathedral and the Bazaar?
No.
maybe it's not well known.
In the interest of moving things along, let's go with no, we haven't.
This is not the right forum to ask if people have read stuff, Marlin.
No. So the broad idea is that the cathedral is a monolith with a single source of knowledge, like a pope or whatever. And the bazaar is a lot more messy and it's full of gossip and rumors, but the bazaar kind of gets things done far faster by just having 10,000 little voices all gossip around each other all the time. And that's basically the idea here. Unfortunately, so far it's mostly just been me. I've had a few people jumping in and helping out with spelling mistakes, but the end goal, the big dream I've got is that a few other people could get involved, and they wouldn't think about asking me if something's okay. They wouldn't stop and say like, "Oh, could we make this change?" They would just make that change on their own copy. And if I like it, I'll take in their changes, and if they like my changes, they'll do that. And maybe nobody likes each other's changes, and they go, "Screw you guys, we're splitting off. It's going to be People's Front to Bind instead." And they'll do their own copy, and that's great as well.
So just to kind of think out loud, it's a bit like the way GitHub works for programming, but for a D&D system, or
it's
like not a D&D system, an RPG system.
It's hosted on every Git I could find. on
that
GitHub,
tracks them.
GitLab. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I've done a lot of work in GitHub in particular for coding and stuff. Because I used to do a lot of stuff around like role play servers for GTA and stuff. And that is something that happens quite a lot, where somebody will develop for one of the core frameworks, but then somebody else will like fork it and tweak it so that it works on one of the other core frameworks. And but like for that to happen, like something changes in it, which makes it kind of almost a different element, but still the same concept. And I think that's really cool. I'm actually a little bit overwhelmed by how cool this is.
Hence why I didn't tell you anything about it.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Well, I mean, if you want to make any changes, it's there. It's sort of a little bit technically programmed. All the sentences are normal sentences. You just type in, take 2d6 and add blah, blah, blah. But the monsters are coded, because I got a little bored of typing out the stat block. Like, oh, here's a little table, and it's going to show the goblin's strength, and the hit points are always equal to 6 plus the strength. It's not a difficult sum to do in your head, but it's just kind of tedious. Yeah. So I eventually got LaTeX to build the goblin for me. And after that, I kind of got bored of copy pasting in goblins and thought, why don't I have this make its own goblin, and it will do a strength somewhere in the rough goblin range of what the strength bonus should be, and then randomly assign it. So you can just stick down \goblin 3 times, and you'll be given 3 totally different goblins.
That's really cool. I saw that because I was watching some of your videos, and you do kind of take a programmer's approach to RPG design.
Yeah,
that's very exciting to me.
And it is fascinating, because I think one of your things was using if statements to design RPG adventures, and it's like, I find that really cool, because it's something that, I mean, I have very basic knowledge of programming, and it would never have occurred to me to do something like that. And watching your video, it's like, holy shit, this is fascinating how you've kind of intertwined these two things.
Cheers. I think by now you'll be like a quarter of the view count. Like 4 people have seen that video. It's a tiny little PeerTube account with some nerd talking about LaTeX and RPGs.
I think the most interesting thing there for me is like essentially the creature generator, right? Is what you were kind of just describing there. Is you ask for a goblin and it generates you a random goblin every time, and if you need 3 of them, you just do it 3 times. I've actually considered doing something like that before, and I don't even know why I didn't do it. Like, I think it was one of those things where, because I've got a bit of a programming background, and I thought about doing something like that, and I just never did it. And now to hear that you're actually doing it, that's really cool.
The funny thing is, I don't actually know how to program, with the one exception of LaTeX. Like, I learned it by accident, because I was just lazy, and I kept trying to find typography shortcuts. So
we might have to have a discussion after this.
Well, I mean, I'd never even heard of LaTeX before I watched your videos. So that's where my knowledge ended up.
Yeah, it's a little weird and janky. It's a bit of a weird, it's literally a 1970s programming language that started before the C language. It's not necessarily difficult, but it does these weird, unexpected things. Like, you can't do anything with numbers except add. So if you want to, do -5, you have to add the negation of yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've dealt with languages like that before. Yeah, it's great. The best, like, if you want to divide, you have to multiply by like in another language I've dealt with. If you want to divide, you have to multiply by like 0.5 if you want to do like divide by 2. That's always a fun one.
Oh yeah,
because like you're sitting there with like a calculator, like right in the programming out. You're like, okay, now if I want to divide by 17, I need to. Okay, that's gonna be like point. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and at one point getting into advanced math theory, like, oh, technically you can do square roots just by doing addition. You're like, yeah, I know you can, but I don't want to. No, Donald Knuth, don't make me do it in LaTeX. I don't want to. But mostly people don't have to do that. For the most part, you just write in words and the words come out the other end, and use /goblin. And if the stuff I've written works, then you should just get a goblin out the other side. It's fairly straightforward.
So I want to talk about the system itself, and let me just bring up the PDF because I've got it. Because one thing that I found really interesting was how you deal with skills in the system. So I kind of scrolled through. I was about 100 and odd pages in. Now I need to scroll all the way back to skills because I didn't think this out beforehand.
Sounds about right.
But yeah, so for skills, essentially, many systems have done it where you kind of add a skill investment as well as an attribute to your role. But what I found really interesting is that you don't have a specific attribute attached to a specific skill. You attach an attribute depending on what you want to do with said skill. And that I found really interesting. Like, for example, you've got academics. Let's take academics, for example. And then you've got this table where you've got different situations in which you'd use your different attributes coupled with your academic skill. For example, academic strength would be orating to a massive crowd. Academics dexterity would be forgery. Academics in speed would be courier runs. And I found that really... Where did you get the idea for that concept?
It was sort of from White Wolf. Like, when you read White Wolf, you can see that dexterity is paired with driving, and then there was some little notes just in I think a few of the books that you could in theory pair it with other things, and the GM might say, intelligence plus drive to navigate a route before you actually go on it. And then when friends were running D&D and I went back, I noticed how inflexible and weird it is that they've just got these attribute bonuses. And I thought, what is this actually doing? I mean, it's kind of telling you that very wise people tend to be good at other things. But this probability adjustment is so small that you're not really going to notice it in the system. And there's a whole bunch of extra work. And you may as well just have a whole load of skills, which it does. It has, like a table of 300 a big list of 300 skills or something. So then jumping back to the White Wolf thing, I thought you could do much better with mixing and matching these different things. I mean, maybe charisma wouldn't always pair with empathy. Maybe empathy could go and do something else. And then you could cut out the number of skills. You could say, I don't know, like subterfuge and intimidation could be kind of the same, like strength plus subterfuge is the ability to say, I'm going to beat you up convincingly.
Yeah.
And then after that clicks, I thought, well, let's just make it the rule. Because if you only have straight skills and you're adding attributes, it's just work. And you've still got all these skills. But if you do an X by Y table, like a table, I mean, if you do a table, then you could have like 4 attributes and 10 skills. Now you've only got 14 things, but you have 40 things coming out the other side. So you get all this detail in the system, and all your abilities pair naturally so that academics tend to be good at oration and tend to be good at all this other stuff, but it's not actually necessary because there are deviations in the other things. So you get all the detail out the other side, but you've done almost none of the work.
I really like that because that is something that, like, as a 5e player, that is something that's always kind of bugged me. And the one that has bugged me the most, actually, one that you kind of mentioned there, is intimidation, right? Because intimidation is charisma based, but I don't see why you wouldn't find the barbarian who's got like stupid strength intimidating. You would, but you can't. Like, you might not have a high charisma because barbarians aren't really charismatic people generally, right? When you're building them, obviously you can build them that way, but
yeah, I mean that's deeply weird. You see a guy at the corner of the bar who can't speak properly. Half his face is missing. He's got big scars. He just kind of grunts.
But he's not intimidating.
He's not intimidating because he's not the happy-go-lucky elf that everyone gets along with, who always remembers your name.
Terrifying.
Terrifying.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's always bugged me, and this literally eliminates that issue, because if you want to intimidate with a skill that you are good at, you just find a different way to intimidate.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, for example, athletics plus intelligence would be used to finding the easiest route to climb.
My climbing friends are always talking to me about how cerebral it is. Like it's a strangely cerebral sport where they sit and stare at a wall for
Yeah.
like 20 minutes, going like, "Oh, if I put my left foot up there while I'm swinging around, then technically I could do that." It came as a shock to me, but I thought, fair enough. It's intelligence based.
Yeah, well, I
No,
mean, like my brother used to do a lot of climbing, and I was about to say literally what you just said there is like they sit there and they plan out their entire route, and if it doesn't work, then they sit at the bottom again, and go like, well, why didn't that work? That should have worked. So yeah, it's just as much a brain operation as it is a strength one or a dexterity one, depending on the climb, because some of them are quite dexterous with the jumps and the little finger grabs and stuff.
I just find it like a really elegant solution
Mm.
because, like Justin plays 5e. I'm a Pathfinder player, but they do kind of suffer from the same problem of you've
Yeah,
got these skills
very constrained.
which do kind of restrict you into these little boxes of what you can and can't do. And conversely, you've got other systems which go completely the other way with 2 pages full of skills, like
Yeah.
Rollmaster, for example, where athletics would be one skill and finding the easiest route to climb would be literally another skill that you would have to invest in. This is just a really, really elegant solution, and that's one of the things that really struck me about this system.
It's certainly been good in play. Players adapt to it pretty quickly. They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm smart and charismatic, so I can tell a good story." Kind of, they seem to feel like it makes sense.
No, it's really good, and like just having a look, the actual presentation of the book is beautiful.
All credit has to go to LaTeX for that. It's another reason to pick it. It does have a little bit of that learning curve, but I mean the output is just really nice.
It is. It's just got it's got like a very old school feel to it, and but because it does actually remind me of some of the Rollmaster books. But obviously,
there's a reasonable chance that somebody used LaTeX when composing them. I mean, we're talking 70s,
Yeah.
80s typography. Like,
but this is a lot clearer to read because Rollmaster books you can only buy in scanned PDF. You can only get in scanned PDFs. So this is obviously much clearer. But then the other thing, and I'd really like you to go into it because I have read it and I think I understand it, but I think it's going to be far better coming from you. Story points.
oh yeah, this was 100% reaction. I do so many projects in my life just out of hatred and vitriol.
I feel that.
So here's the problem. It's very engineering approach. I've got everything must be a solution to a problem, and then your life is just a quagmire of problems. So I'm rocking up to this game. This is like 8 years ago now. Rocking up to this Dungeons and Dragons game that my friends put on, or Pathfinder or something. Yeah, it was Pathfinder. And firstly, the GM's asked me to do a bit of a backstory. I'm like, I'm a grown-ass man. I have 3 jobs right now. I don't want to write and I'm not a writer, I'm not going to necessarily put anything interesting out. So before I get to writing, I read about the world so that my story makes sense. So there's one block of time to read about the world and fit it in, another block to write the thing. Then I give it to him. He reads it. Then he's got to incorporate this into the world that he's already written. More time spent. This by this point it's insane, I think, already. But then when we get to the table, somebody's got a backstory with hobbits that are basically a Catholic family, and he's named every single one of his extended family with a tree. I was just like, oh, the poor GM. And when the GM finally killed off the entire family, the player was aghast, and I was like, yeah, too right. Too much. Let all the hobbits die. And then we had another player whose background was she was an elvish princess and was therefore rich. So the entire notion of being an adventurer and collecting gold just went out the window. Like everyone else started with the normal gold pieces, and she started with all the other gold pieces, which was initially a bit weird. But then I thought, no, it's a fantasy game. You should, that's the character you want, you should be able to do that. But then maybe somebody else should get something instead. So the solution to that was the background points, and they're not actually there to they're there to give a background, but they're mostly there so I don't have to read people's poorly written prose. So the system itself is you rock up and backstory's banned, do not read about the game, don't do any homework, it's a homework-free zone, and you just get 5 story points. It's 5 times where you can say, oh, I know a guy, or I know this language. So you don't have to read about which languages are in play in the world. The GM just says, and they sit in the back speaking their strange gnomish tongue, which you can't understand. And that lets any one of the players say, actually, I do know gnomish. So that prompts the question, okay, how do you know gnomish? Just justify this to us quickly. You don't even need a cutscene or anything. And they'll say, oh, I was in the circus, and there was a gnome, and he taught me gnomish. We were very close. So fast forward 10 sessions later, somebody spent all the background points, and the next person they've got is probably related to the circus in some way. And at this point, you have a really deep built-in background, but it never had to interrupt the flow of anything. And we know that all those little interruptions to say, oh, I did this, we know that they're all interesting and useful and relevant because they always come as a reaction to the current scene.
I found that amazing. I thought that was such a really good idea because when I first started playing, I was that person who went, right, there you go, 5 pages of backstory. This is my character. And when I started, I know it was Scott, so nobody cares. You know Scott's going to listen to this and torture me for that, right? So then when I started GMing, I was quite insistent, okay, you must have a backstory. But I found that became a problem because a lot of the things in the backstory, they didn't mesh with the world in general. And a lot of times I had to disregard a lot of it. So then I kind of went, all right, let's just give me broad strokes and give me a motivation sort of thing. And now, but this idea is something I may even incorporate into Pathfinder games going forward.
I think you could fairly easily just lift out that bit of the system for others. I will mention though it has had only one small problem. While it's been wonderful, all the stuff I said, the little problem is nobody uses the bloody system. Nobody spends points because it's not a renewable resource. So all the players hoard it like so many magic potions, going, nope, I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna save it for the thing.
Yeah, you're gonna save it for them to go nuclear at some point and just kind of use them all at the same time.
So this is part of the whole continuous development cycle thing where the next edition is I think I'll just be giving out 5 flat XP for spending story points, and the idea is that you start with this lump sum which is unspent because you have to tell the story points in order to get the XP. And it also means that when new characters come in and they're quite fresh, they'll be able to ramp up pretty quickly because they still have their introductory 25 XP points from spending 5 story points or whatever.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I did find that a quite a unique, and I think you said it best, solution to a problem. That problem obviously being backstories and how annoying they can be.
Work in general. It's not just the GM reading the player's prose. Often it's players reading the GM's prose. Like, oh, there's a secret library and there's 3 different cultures, and you read this and like, oh, what? This is it's just a rip-off of Dark Ages India. What are you doing?
Yeah, and I found the system really interesting. Definitely, if anybody wants to find it, do you want to just tell people where they can find Bind?
I suppose the easiest would be ttrpgs.com. That's my general blog, and there's a bit at the side that says Bind, and then it's got the PDFs to click on. And it's, of course, it's on GitLab. So and GitHub, if anyone's got, if you know what the word Git means, that's not an insult, then you should go to GitHub or GitLab. If you think it's just a British term for an insult, then go to ttrpgs.com.
And the indexing is linked. I've just discovered that now, and it's made me very, very excited.
Oh yeah, that was some of the nerdiest stuff I did on there. I hate it was another bit of hatred. I hated the fact that White Wolf games were so good, they were so juicy, and then you try and like find, oh, where was that ability? I've forgotten. It was some kind of discipline thing. There's nothing. There's no indexing. There's a table of contents which literally lists the chapters and nothing else.
Oh, that is my personal like pet peeve, is any kind of like source book that doesn't have an index. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, so Binder's all reactionary to that as well, and
that's amazing.
Not only does it reference,
I'm so happy right now.
Oh, the indexing is crazy. Go to if you've got the core book open, jump into Appendix B or C, I think it is.
Let's have a look.
There's actually an index specifically for spells, which all has a list, and not only lists the page number, but it has one small summary of the spell for every single spell. So you can just jump in. It'll be damage equals this plus that, at page 56 or whatever. And I programmed this took ages. I put in another function. Sorry, I'm getting seriously noting now.
No, I love it. Keep going.
Got another one for the other books. So if you open an adventure book and there's some monster and a note saying, oh, he's going to jump down the hill and ram into the players, that'll have a little footnote saying, see ramming in the core rules, page 78 or something. And that will be the precise page number, because each one of the projects checks to see if the other project is outside. And if that other project is outside, like if you're downloading both, then it will go and get the exact page number from the other project.
That's amazing.
That is phenomenal.
Oh my god. I think so happy right now.
I think Justin is actually swooning right now.
Yeah, I'm honestly, like, I mean, John, you'll vouch for this. I'm very, very rarely speechless, right? I've always got something to say.
Yeah,
I'm just really so blown away right now.
Yeah,
I've said it's fun to finding people that quite like this stuff. I have felt like such a lonely nerd because it's been about, I think I pick it up now and again. Like, I don't develop it full time, but it's been about 7 years on and off of just sort of wandering in, trying to do another bit. And it's been, well, I'm not very good at marketing. I don't think anyone knows this thing exists, to be honest.
Well, we'll do our best to change that.
Yeah, they should.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah. And this is John.
Yeah.
Put at the top of the list.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a very, very happy nerd right now.
Yeah, I'm adding it to the. Yeah, it is fascinating, and again, it's a lot of what you're bringing to the table is this sort of weird, but at the same time makes total sense marriage of RPG design with programming, with a programming mentality. Do you have a big programming background, or?
Well, literally zero. No, I learned to program LaTeX, and then that's it. I'm currently getting into a bit of Python, but that was afterwards. Like, I'm not a programmer. I literally just picked this up, and that is technically my first programming language.
Well,
that's actually awesome.
You should be a programmer. You've got the sort of right mentality for it. The sort of let's try do this as efficiently as possible, and you can kind of see that coming through in your system. That I say your system, the system in the open source system, that it is it is efficient. Everything about it. It is efficient. In 125 pages, you present a full-blown RPG, which could easily rival any of the big sort of AAA productions.
Cheers. Oh, and if you want even fewer pages, the entire book is littered with tiny little if statements throughout, like examples and images and other things. Right, actually it's automated. Oh, there's the loud one. The entire book is littered with these little conditions, so that if you have some example text beside a rule, it says, projectiles use dexterity plus projectiles in order to fire, for example, if there were an elf with a bow, blah, 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 there'll be a little catch there that can remove the example statement. And if you compile it without the example statement, then instead of a big chunky A4 book with all the examples and pictures, you'll get exactly the same book, the same rules, the same sentences, but minus the examples and the pictures. You'll get a little A5 book with updated references and updated index, but it's just the rules for the hardcore people who say, like, I don't want any fluff, I just want to have a list of rules and nothing else.
John, I'm in love. We've got problems. Oh my god. That's I'm sorry.
Justin, you need to get yourself on Mastodon and start following Malin.
yeah, I do.
Malin,
Jesus.
I'm sorry for what's going to happen to you.
There's gonna be a lot once I get like my brain in order, because this sounds exactly like the kind of thing that I had in my head when I first got into like tabletop role playing games. Because John, I don't know if you remember, but like when we first started getting into it, I immediately started looking at how I could like build software to do a lot of the stuff we were trying to do at the table, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
And then I just I gave up on it because I just didn't. I don't even know why. Like, you're doing it and it's awesome, and yeah,
jump on. Absolutely, jump on board. Stop me being a lonely nerd. Jump in and change things, or change things in your own copy. And there's a very full load of issues on the issues board. I should note that as well. If anyone does go and download it, and then you have gripes, you're like, spelling's horrible, and I don't like the way this works, and blah blah blah. Gnomes are stupid. If anyone's got these complaints, then the GitLab has an email address. So if you click on that, email the email address there, that automatically turns into an issue on the GitLab, and then that automatically makes a little bing in my computer, and I see that somebody's complaining about something. So even if you're not programming, well, even if you don't want to write and if you don't want to compile the stuff yourself, if you just have notes like, this thing looks horrible, send me your complaints. Send me your irritating your irritations and your bitches. Send me your bug reports.
No, I think it is fantastic. What you've got here is something special. I need to read the overview because in the introduction you've got an overview, and the first sort of section is what your intentions for this system is, and I think it's a great mission statement because you've got Bind was an attempt to fix D&D which got out of control. Bind is yet another fantasy RPG about killing ogres for gold pieces. Bind mechanics force a fast real-world resolution to every encounter. Bind is an adult game, meaning we all have jobs and such, so the game should make as few demands on everyone's time as possible. And Bind kills all house rules by allowing people to integrate those rules into the core book and reprinting.
That's right, Bind has no house rules and never will, because if you get house
just
rules...
make it a rule.
Yep, that's official rules. Stick in your copy, type it out, and then just print off the PDF, go to your local friendly print shop, print out a copy, and those are the official rules of your table.
That is phenomenal.
Right now.
I think you have definitely classed up this joint. I think I think we're going to struggle next week.
I definitely don't have the GitLab page open right now, and I'm going through stuff. That's definitely not what I'm doing.
You've closed down all those Pornhub tabs and just opened a GitLab tab.
I mean, yes. Wow. Yeah, no, dude, this is amazing. Like, just so clever, and I'm really struggling to put into words like how overly impressed I am right now.
So Malin, the open source aspect of Bind, was that because you are in the sort of open source sphere? Because you did mention Bash earlier.
Yeah, I am now. I mean, I think might sound like an old school person, but I actually came to this pretty late in life. So I'd already made the RPG, and I looked around and I could see that lots of people made independent RPGs, but I didn't like those rules. I wanted to make my own. And then it was later in life that I just, I really wanted to move to Serbia from Scotland. So like I learned how to use computers from that. I had learned a bit before that. Like when I was writing the book, my computer broke down, and I needed like a properly functioning computer because like, even before LaTeX, when you're trying to make these things with all these images, suddenly it takes up a ton of resources. Like if you don't have enough RAM and whatnot, the entire thing just crashes. It's really slow to just skip through pages when you got too many references. So I was forced to learn computing simply to write this book. Like a friend gave me an old she heard I had problems and gave me an old shopping bag full of random PC parts. Like there's a motherboard in there and a couple of sticks of RAM. She's like, well, if you can figure out how to put it together, then I'm pretty sure there's a complete computer in there just about. So with zero computing knowledge, I just went back and thought, oh, this will be like Lego. It was not like Lego.
Well, I think,
but I got there in the end.
Well, Justin and I both kind of come from computing backgrounds, and I at one point I was quite heavily invested in the open source community. I was a user of multiple GNU Linux systems and all that. But I just, for some reason, it never stuck with me. But having getting to know you and kind of learning about Bind and having these conversations with you has just been a massive trip down memory lane for me. To the point where I've got a laptop that I'm looking at kind of going,
It's certainly a bit easier to put together on Linux. Like I really wanted this to be open and to make sure I could do it on Windows. Luckily, somebody who's on Windows, some kind soul, came along and set it up on Windows and then put the instructions in the wiki. So I know it's possible, even though if the wiki instructions to you don't make any sense to you, then I don't know how to help. But if you want to do it on your computer, the setup is super easy on Linux. You just say, package manager, whatever it is. For those not in the know, Linux has massive app stores. Like there's just everything plus dictionaries plus fonts in there. So you just say, I want the following things. There's 3 things you install. Then you type in make, and it makes everything.
I'm just going to have to quickly divert this conversation because I've just seen something on the Git that I'm very annoyed about because I was literally writing this myself about a week ago, and you've already done it.
What was it?
The dungeon generator.
Shit, yes, you did. Tell me.
I was literally writing one of these the other day, and you've already done it. Oh, I'm so annoyed at myself.
Join me. I'm at one of the hardest parts. I kind of stopped because it was I've got a fiddly thing and I don't know how to solve it. I didn't like any of the other dungeon generators because they kept spilling out these nice maps, and then you'd read the contents and it would be like, oh, room 3A, there's a goblin and 5 gold pieces. I'm like, why? What's his name? What is he doing there? Why is he taking a poop? Is he sitting in meditation? Why is there a goblin in there? What is happening with this thing?
Yeah, that's literally the same problem I had with them, right? Is you would, and even some of these dungeons that you'd find oh yeah, here's a list of dungeon ideas that you could use. They were all just nonsensical.
It's absolute nonsense the entire way down. So there's a different tactic here. The idea is that the computer generates a series of rooms which is either a mine or a cave. So it's either naturally flowing water and erosion or somebody's chasing gold or whatever. It won't make a huge amount of difference which it is. But then after this thing, a civilization moves in. It could be gnomes, it could be dwarves, it could be elves. And then you lay out each room. And if it's a center room, then it can be a corridor. And if it's off to the side, it might be a kitchen or a feasting hall or a living space or a library, something like this. So you map out the world's most useless dungeon because it's just a bunch of people living there. And the third stage, it goes through every room in the dungeon and kills the elves, replacing them with a necromancer or the goblins or whatever the bad guys are. And when you look through the entire thing, you've got the coherent room, with bridges and libraries and why it's all there.
That's so cool.
That does make sense. I mean, that I like that idea because, yeah, I do agree that a lot of the dungeon generators, obviously, I'm not going to mention any of them. You build them, and it does seem very random. I know some of them you can kind of tailor it slightly to, a type of creature or a type of adventure, etc., etc. But it does kind of feel somewhat impersonal. And don't get me wrong, sometimes when I design my own dungeons, it becomes impersonal because I'll put a creature in there just because fuck them. I'm in a bad mood that day and I want the players to suffer a tiny bit. But there is at least a reason for it, as opposed to I just hit a random button.
Yeah, and it can really mess with the ecology, if that's not too fancy a word. Like it's a bit weird when you've got the massive everything-eating green slime, and behind them a whole bunch of goblins. Like, what's happening there? Are the goblins about to be eaten? I think they're about to be eaten. Why is the green slime even going for adventurers? It's got goblins there. What do the goblins think they're going to do? Shouldn't they be, like, if they're trapped, shouldn't they be dead 5 minutes after the adventurers enter the dungeon? What is going on here?
Yeah, it does. A lot of times it does feel, especially dungeons, they do feel very kind of video gamey. Where this creature is in this room. This creature has probably been in this room for 500 years for no fucking reason whatsoever. And it's a weird one because I kind of like my dungeons to be a bit more dynamic. So if the players go to a specific room and there's a creature in there that just happens to knock them around a bit too much, when they leave to regroup and come back, that creature may not be there. Maybe something else. Maybe nothing at all. But there is going to be an active evolution. And when you go to these dungeon generators and just click on generate, it kind of takes a lot of that away from the flow of the game. It just doesn't feel natural.
I think it depends on how you use the tool, though, right? So if you, in the interest of, just trying to save time when you're prepping, right? So, like we was mentioned earlier, a lot of us are adults. We have, jobs and lives and other things to be getting on with. Sitting down and, like planning out an entire dungeon can be very time consuming if you really get into it. But having something like, like this, where you can click a button and it generates not only, a dungeon layout, but, a history of it and all of that as well. It still gives you the option to be dynamic later on. Right, because it just means that you've now got that layout that you could say, okay, I've got the floor plan, I've got some creatures that are in there because of the history of it and stuff. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when they get there, they see a goblin in the first room. Go, we better go back to town and get supplies, and then when they come back, well, that goblin saw them as well, right?
So certainly, if it's adjustable. I mean, this comes back to the question of source files versus the output. Like, if the output is just bang, there's a PDF and you got to scribble notes with a pencil over the margins, then it's a bit unsatisfying. But if you get some basics, like a big list of rooms, that's what I should do next for the dungeon generator. Make it output markdown, like a Reddit comment, as if the entire dungeon were a big Reddit comment. That would be easy.
Yeah.
See, you guys are now talking about things that are going out way out of my expertise. I mean, I understand Markdown because I use Obsidian, and Obsidian is a fantastic tool. But yeah, I may have to look into this LaTeX malarkey.
It's quite good. Most importantly, it can take templates. So if you've got like 5 books, like there's a few different books for bind, and you just stick in that one line saying use this template, and then the template, and they all look exactly the same. That makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, in Obsidian there is we use templates as well. Obsidian, if you haven't heard of it, it's a note-taking program, but it has a very strong community of tabletop role players, and it's modular, so anybody can develop a plugin for it. So you've got all these TTRPG players who have created these plugins, and it has become my go-to campaign manager, and that has that facility as well, where I'll do one page of something, let's say an NPC. I'll create an NPC, but then I will copy that and have it as a template. So then when the next time I create a file, all I have to do is open the file and it automatically populates a lot of the grunt work.
This looks really good. And it looks like it's markdown and text underneath, so you could share it with other people quite easily, I take it, and let them modify it.
So here's the real question then. How good would it be to find a way to implement an open source system into an open source project like management thing like that, right? That's surely got to be something along the next steps.
Well, for a campaign management. I mean, that's part of the thing as well. Like the campaign books already exist. I have to say they could maybe be a little bit easier. I have been tempted on occasion to try and rewrite the thing in like Markdown and then have Pandoc translate it to LaTeX and then apply the template, and then I just think, this is too much work. I can't do it. I couldn't do that just so I can make sure that other people can contribute especially when there's 0 contributors so far, basically, or like 1 or 2.
Well, there was, and this is going off to what Justin said, back in the days of Realmworks, which is, a lot of the Realmworks people migrated to Obsidian. But back in the Realmworks days, there was a realm which was public access.
Yeah.
So people would go in and just kind of go, right, in this part of the world, I've created this tribe, for example. And it was system agnostic, and that was brilliant as well.
That would be wonderful. And yeah, the original version of Bind had quite a lot of the world mapped out. I mean, actually, it still does. And I'm starting to think it's got too much of the world mapped out. I don't like it. I'm thinking for the next edition of just being quiet about everything except like 3 inches in front of the players' noses, and just giving people a way to generate the next town over, and then leave the rest out. And if you need a bigger campaign, the answer will just be do it yourself, and maybe give me a shout. See if I want to pull the same thing in.
Well, I mean, you could always just use the age-old World of Warcraft expansion logic of, oh, no, actually, there's another continent over there. Your game is on that continent, and you can just generate that as you want.
Yeah, there's literally another continent over to the west, which I just didn't fill out. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Problem solved. They're over in the west continent. Job done. Oh, wait, that one's been fully mapped down now? Oh, you'll never guess what. We found another continent to the north. It's funny that. And you can just keep making continents.
75 continents later, you've just got someone going, how big is this fucking planet?
Yes.
It's a non-Euclidean planet. Going north, east, south, west will not necessarily get you back to the same continent.
Holy shit, there's a campaign idea.
I was literally about to say, that sounds like a really fun dungeon idea.
I saw one. There's one already made. It was the most bizarre thing. Yeah, if you look in Dungeon Magazine issue, I wish I could remember. Join Mastodon. I posted it up on Mastodon when I found it excitedly. There's a non-Euclidean dungeon, and it's got like a map which shows only an abstraction where players are going, and a couple of pictures which are kind of weird because it's like a dungeon, but of course non-Euclidean. And you've got all these. It had something like 5 different pictures of the same room from different perspectives, all of them trying to explain to the GM how this thing works. Like the actual dungeon is very small. There's not much to the map. It's up, down, left, and right a bit. But most of the adventure is just taken up trying to explain to the GM, here's how it goes. That's what happens if you roll a marble downhill. There's a question of what downhill means there. This is how light works in non-Euclidean space. It's like, I think a physicist must have written into Dungeon Magazine excitedly, and they just said, well, I don't know what this guy's talking about, but it sounds nice, so we'll publish it.
Like, you've got to wonder if that was, like, some physics student sitting in a, like, lecture hall somewhere and literally had that same concept of, oh my god, what if dungeon?
I'm not sure I could ever GM for it because I don't really know maths that well, but it just sounds so exciting. Like, yeah, what would a fire do? What would a torch do in non-Euclidean space?
Never mind
How does
that.
heat work?
What about shooting an arrow?
Right.
What happens to the trajectory of the arrow?
And if there's wind in there, is it going to go really weird because you can't go sideways in the normal way? You have to go like non-Euclidean sideways.
I'm literally, while you guys are talking, I'm scrolling through Malin's Mastodon feed right now. I'm trying to find this fucking thing.
It's in there
oh
somewhere.
My god, yeah. Okay, I'm so happy today. This is the happiest I've been in a very long time.
Are you trying to say I don't make you happy?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
I've got to bring in a third person just to make you happy.
We're going to spice things up, John. We're getting stale.
Nag. That's all I fucking got.
No, honestly, this project sounds so awesome. And I am going to absolutely be making some contributions in the future.
That would be wonderful. It would be wonderful to get somebody else doing some of the work, even if it's just raising issues. Even if somebody just goes onto the board and goes, "Oh, this thing's rubbish," so it's all useful.
I will be fixing it.
So the main question is, when the fuck are we going to play this?
Now, let's get our dice.
If I did not have a game tonight, I'd be definitely very inclined to do so.
I've got some Sea of Thieves to play later as well, so I can't.
But yeah, we definitely need to play that. And Malin, it would be glorious if you were able to either join us or perhaps even GM for us at some point.
Oh my god, yes, that'd be amazing.
I'd be absolutely delighted. I have to say, like, so being a player sounds quite tantalizing, almost surreal, like a player in your own game after you design the thing. Of course, there's quite a lot to read, so if I were doing the GM thing, like, that's fine too.
No, I mean, I'm happy to GM it. I just may need you to correct me on, everything.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of rulings from that game going, correct me if I'm wrong, but...
Oh, no, I'll try not to. Nobody likes a backseat GM. It's the worst. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, once you got it, it's yours.
Like, I think when the backseat GM wrote it, it's okay.
I mean, that's kind of the thing, it's not a case of just having somebody on your table kind of going, well, actually, it's like, yeah, the dude who actually wrote this thing is telling me I'm wrong.
But I might be wrong.
No, but it would take away the most interesting information, which is after you make something, if you hand it to somebody, it's really fascinating to see how that plays out. What do they do with this toy? How do they use it? But if you come in and say like, no, it was meant to be used this way, then it's a whole different thing, and you still don't know how. You have no evidence about how people just use it organically.
All right, I will go over this book, and we will get a table together.
Plus, that being said, with the whole concept of open source, if you decide that's the rule, John, that's the rule.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally the concept.
Are you 100% sure you want to give me that power?
So maybe I'll GM.
Yeah, power corrupts. And it will corrupt the shit out of me.
If you ever want to run a little one shot or something, there's a repository specifically for one shots where players wake up, they were a whole bunch of farmers or whatever, there's some pre-generated characters, so you don't have to spend time making it, and it's a little one shot. But of course, as with all things in Bind, there's a little extra bit with some if statements. So if when you download it, you type in make one shot, you'll get the one shot. But if you just type in make normally, you get a second level. So when players break out from the Goblin Warrens and see freedom, they don't actually see freedom. There's a second level to the dungeon.
Ah, that's so cool.
I can hear Justin's erection right now.
Oh my god, dude! Like, you don't even understand. Like, this kind of thing has been on my. This would be really cool if somebody did this list since I first got into this hobby.
It is genuinely fascinating, and I am definitely up for running that. Malin, we would be honoured if you were to join us.
Absolutely.
I would love nothing more. It would be wonderful to jump into my own system. I spent so long designing this world. I should see it at least sometime.
So, with that said, should we take a seat on the couch?
Yes.
Yeah. So every week we ask some of our listeners to send in questions, and it would be great if you were to help us answer them.
Sounds good.
Again, you could probably answer in a far more intellectual way than we ever could. Okay, so I think we've got an interesting situation here, don't we?
We do.
Where the same person has sent us questions individually.
Yes.
So
and in true us fashion, I don't know. You might have sent us both the same question.
Well, I've got a question, and I think this one is 100% directed at me. So I'll read this first, and we'll see where it takes us. So it's, hi John. See, it is me, obviously. Yep. Society games are around 4 to 5 hours each, and a character will gain a level every 3 games, so between about 12 to 15 hours. Do you think it's reasonable to level at this pace in an adventure path? And that question is from Sci-Fi, from a speck of dust in the western spiral arm of the Andromeda Galaxy. So, for those of you out there who don't quite understand what this gentleman's referring to, Pathfinder Society are a series of one-shots where you have a character and you develop the character over the course of these one-shots. And each game is around 4 to 5 hours, and every 3 games you level up. Adventure paths, on the other hand, are 3 to 6 books, each book being about 64 pages. And running an adventure path as a what's the word I'm looking for? As a society game, you kind of level up each book. And the quick answer to the question is no. You wouldn't level up a character at the same pace. Just because in an adventure path, there's a lot more involved, where in society games, they're very much to the point. So you walk in, you introduce your characters, you're given a quest, you complete the quest. Whereas an adventure path there's a lot more nuance to it. You get to play with your characters a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that, like, adventure path. I mean, I've not done much society, but I know adventure paths tend to be a bit more long form. Whereas the society stuff is more like a bit like more like mission based, right? So like taking a note off of a notice board and going doing that, coming back, getting your reward.
Yeah, essentially that's kind of how it's set up. Malin, you did say that you played Pathfinder. Do you have any experience in society play?
No, none at all. So I'm a little confused about the setup. Is this like you go to a place and then find a different GM each week, or?
Yeah, it's essentially organized play. So you build a character, and character creation there are very strict parameters as to what sort of things your character can take, what items your character can buy, just in order to kind of maintain a balance. So theoretically, I can take my level 5, I think he is now, Gunslinger Bard, to any Pathfinder Society table playing within that level range.
Right, because if you found out that the other GM has given this person 3 rings of wishes, and they rock up at your game thinking that they're going to use those 3 rings of wishes to do stuff, you'd hunt down the other GM and strangle them.
Yeah. So it kind of avoids that. You can, I think, in 2nd edition, you can only buy common magical items of your level or lower. So even if you were to find something exceptional during an adventure, you don't get to keep it on your character sheet.
So would that entail that harkens back to Gary Gygax's idea of you cannot have a meaningful campaign without keeping accurate track of time, because in theory, real world time would have to pass in game at roughly the same speed, so that if people are swapping tables, they won't accidentally go back in time 3 months.
Yeah, there is a bit of a suspension of disbelief because each season of the Pathfinder Society there is an ongoing thread. So sometimes you'll play a game which is at the end of said thread, but then the next game you play just happens to be one that's at the beginning. So there is a lot of disconnect in that respect.
It sounds like it would be better to go with Gygax's original rule. I've picked it up, and I have to say it's been fantastic. Because when players come along, I've got a whole bunch of expats, people who are from other countries here in Serbia that rotate around. So I can't guarantee the same people at the table all the time. And what we do is just say, real world time is game time, and every adventure has to start and end somewhere safely. Then people can just swap in as they like.
Yeah, I did see someone. I don't know where I saw that rule brought up, and I thought it was very interesting.
Questing Beast, probably. Ben something or other has been talking about it, or at least that's where I saw it, and I think it's got a pretty big video channel.
Possibly. I don't know. I just remember seeing it and just kind of going, that's like a very interesting sort of proposition, which is one of those things that's kind of been mostly forgotten about these days.
It also goes really well with slow leveling, because at least I feel like players are a bit more accepting of slow leveling when there's real world time passing, and they know there is. So when they've still got this additional skill and it's still not quite as big as they want it, because they want to be like a master craftsman or something, and then you remind them this has literally been 3 months.
Yeah.
Nobody becomes a master craftsman in 3 months. It's a lot easier to accept at that point.
Well, yeah. I do kind of like that point, because that is something that has sometimes bugged me with like playing, a campaign where you're like, oh yeah, you've been traveling for 3 weeks to get to this town, but like real world, it's been like 5 seconds. Because it was just, you got on a boat and you traveled for 3 weeks on the boat and nothing happened, right? So you're like, well, in those 3 weeks, why couldn't I have done that?
Oh, you see, but I allow that in my games.
Yeah, but that's because you're a good DM.
I mean, because
most others don't.
Because
in my experience.
Because it was basically they were traveling from point A to point B. It was going to take a couple of weeks on a boat. I did a couple of encounters just to kind of spice up the session, but then after that, it was like, okay, so the next 2 weeks pass, completely without any sort of events. Is there any sort of downtime activity that people would have liked to have done? And some people retrained, other people crafted.
Yeah.
And we just kind of accounted for that sort of passage of time as if it were a montage.
Training montage. Yeah, see, because that's the kind of thing that I've always quite liked, is like actually filling downtime with stuff, because I've played in a lot of games where they don't, and it's like like a week goes by, it's like, okay, what was I just
I always feel the need to I always feel the need to fill in with something, like even if the players are traveling for 2 days, I'll roll in the encounter chart there's nothing, and thank God, I have to say, if you have like every single day an encounter, it's just the worst. But it feels a bit too cheap. I do feel the need to mention something. Like sometimes I just bluntly end up blurting out, and there's houses and villages, and because obviously I don't know what to fill this with. But at least something is there, like there's some basic substance.
So, and I hope I answered Sci-Fi's question. So the short answer for me would be no, it's not reasonable. I don't think there should be that much difference, but where in Adventure Path you do have time to get to know your character a lot more. Whereas in the Society games, it's literally you pick up your character sheet when you're about to play and you put it away after the game.
As soon as you finish,
yeah. So I think given that, maybe every 4 to 5 sessions You might want to be leveling up. All right, so Justin, do you want to?
So I also got a question from the same individual. But when he sent me his question, he'd moved. He was not in the same position. Because when he sent me a question, he was from the untouched corner of King Midas's bathtub.
So he gets about a bit.
He does indeed. But the question I've got is that he's been looking at the Kickstarter for What's Old is New starter box, and he was wondering if we had any thoughts on the system.
What starter box, sorry?
What's Old is New.
I have never fucking heard of that.
Me neither, but I had a quick look on the Kickstarter, and it's done very well. So their goal was only like 6,500, and it's got 26,000. So they've done very well. But it was first released back in 2016, and it is a game that's been designed for fantasy, modern, and sci-fi adventuring. So it has basically it's got a different like core book for new stuff, old stuff, and like now, right?
So they rewrite the book each time for the different settings?
No, so it all comes in the start book. There was 3 books originally, but now it's all kind of in this one book, it seems. So you get a 68-page rule book, which includes the beast theory, which is actually a very, very condensed book. And then you've got 3 20-page adventures. So one's fantasy, which is old, one's modern, which is now, and then one's sci-fi, which is new. So those 3 books are adventures in those settings. But the core rules across the 3 are the same.
Okay.
I'm on the Kickstarter right now. Looks good.
It does look good.
Although this is just the art, of course. No idea if the system's any good. Maybe it's a pile of nonsense.
Exactly. So,
see, if they'd only used some if statements, they could have had one core rulebook that outputted an old form, and then
You tell them that.
if only. But looking at it, it does look pretty decent. I like the fact that it's got the flexibility for the 3 different settings, right? So you can just with one set of rules, you can look at 3 different worlds, which is quite nice. I quite like that. Without having to go out and spend like a fortune on different books or anything like that. It comes with a bunch of pre-gen characters. 18 to be precise. And a bunch of VTT assets.
VTT asset pack. Okay. I'm just trying to find any information on the actual system. It looks like a 2d6.
So down the bottom. Well, no, it uses a flexible d6 dice pool system.
Okay.
So I don't think it's always 2d6. I think it's
like a rubbly one made out of rubber.
Yeah, exactly that. It's a bendy d6. And the character creation is life path. So there's a chance your character dies at level 1.
That's it. That Traveller springs to mind.
Those are my favorite.
That just springs to mind.
systems.
Yeah, excellent. We want we want it to be so lethal you die in character creation. That's exactly what I want out of a game.
But
I did have.
To be fair, I did play Traveller once, and my character ended up being a millionaire. I was like, yeah, I rolled well.
Must be nice.
Oh, if you're a random idea sprung to mind, this is the great idea which was abandoned because I never had the time or ability to do it. But if you want a real challenge, I always thought it'd be fun to have the character creation as like a choose your own adventure, but the choose your own adventure would be at the top of the page or the bottom, like a footnote. And the idea is that you read the thing and it says turn to page 56 to do this or that, and you just flip back and forth throughout the book, so you gain a rough overview of the book while making the character.
That's genius.
I'm definitely not writing that down right now.
As the pen clicks, I actually physically heard that pen clicking.
Right. And John, you know how little I write stuff down, all right? This is a big deal.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're using pens now, dude.
Look, all right?
Sorry, that was horrible. That was horrible of me. I feel bad.
I've got my reasons.
No, it's definitely interesting.
This is a nice book, proper formatting and seal fonts. Was it Unkiel? I never know.
Yeah, I mean, I think sci-fi would be quite good to back this.
Absolutely. It definitely looks like a very interesting system. And I think it's one that I would actually consider backing myself. Um, so just looking down at the bottom as well, the books sell individually as well. So you can buy just the adventures if you wanted. So if you just wanted the core rulebook and one of the adventures, you could, or you can get the whole lot through backing it here, which is always good.
Yeah, I definitely like it. Sci-fi, if you do end up buying this, I expect you to run it for us at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
I quite like this bit on the website where the question is this a universal system? And I was expecting them to say yes, but they're like, no, it is not. It does this Tolkien-esque fantasy. It does not modern, but 80s action, very specific. And Trekkian to Warsian range. What is Warsian? Warsian. Trekkian to Warsian sci-fi. Trekkian must mean Star Trek.
Yeah.
Okay, so that tells me they're being
unless
quite
that's
particular.
like Star Wars. Like
oh yeah, Star Wars.
Yeah,
Trekking.
Trekking
Star Wars.
Yep.
That makes sense. You got it.
I'm a genius.
So they've been quite precise about what they're doing. It probably speaks quite well of the system.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Cypher system, which is a universal system, and don't get me wrong, it is quite good, but I've always got that sort of, but what if I wanted to do this? Would the system be able to kind of keep up with me? Whereas this, they've kind of gone, these are the three options we're giving you. And I kind of, those three options should be enough for most players.
Absolutely, yeah.
To be honest.
Yeah, well, you've got your sci-fi, you've got your modern day-ish 80s, close enough. So, some of us were born then. And then I think it's definitely something that even I would consider putting money into, and I don't do that very often. I hate spending money unless it's on stupid stuff that I will never ever use.
Yeah, fair play. No, I like it.
Absolutely.
Definite fan. All right, so we do have one more question. As soon as I find it. The thing is, I've got to go to jot form because if not, I don't get the name. And then he complains. All right. Okay, so this next question is from Couch, who's way down deep in the middle of the Congo, where a hippo took an apricot, a guava, and a mango. He's getting creative.
I think he's getting a little bit bored at work. I might have to go and start ordering more food.
All right, so is there ever a point where you say no during a campaign? When the players have gone too far and you either stop the flow to put the ducks in a row, or when a player needs to stop and a conversation needs to be had. Basically, where is the line?
So, I was actually discussing something along these lines before we started recording. The first time I ever DM'd, it was a Dragon Age campaign, and I don't know Dragon Age, right? And one of the players in the group knows the Dragon Age world inside out, like the back of their hand, but not the tabletop role-playing game, but the actual world environment. And within the first 5 seconds of the campaign starting, they went completely off the rails of the adventure that we were following in the back of the book. So that's where I had to be like, no. Because I don't know anything that's going on, and I don't know enough about this world to bullshit to you. So that's where I had to say no one time.
Yeah, the question seems a bit too open. I mean, that's a good example with like Lauren being kind to new GMs, but then it sounded like they were asking about the so-called problem player,
Yeah,
jumping up and saying, "I'm going to use the knife and tear out the goblin's eyes," and ask him whatnot. And
yeah. Yeah, I've not really had a situation like that at the table myself, because I guess like most of the people that I play with, because I play in person, like exclusively almost, everyone I play with is in the same sort of friend group, so we kind of all know where each other's limits are. Um, so I've never really had a moment where I've had to be like, we might be touching on some dicey stuff here, guys. So,
yeah, I think I do feel like that's very much a sort of online,
mm,
too much on Reddit problem. People keep mentioning these horror stories, like
yeah.
about, my player just jumped up and pooped in the desk. Is it all right? And there's 3,000 comments being like, no, what the hell,
No,
man?
you
What is
should
going
talk to
on with you?
them.
Get them out of the game. Get them out of your house, for God's sake. Possibly call the police.
And I'd say no quite frequently. To be fair, but then again, I do play almost exclusively online. So there is an added layer of having to mediate. So, it can be silly little things where it's like, okay, we need to get this back on track. Where you just kind of break the flow of the game for a moment and just kind of go, right, no, guys, we need to focus. We need to, stop messing around for a bit and let's get this done, sort of thing. And I think doing that has avoided the situation of completely stopping.
Hmm.
I think being like a constant moderating presence stops from things getting to a point where it's like, right, we have to talk about this or this cannot continue.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually, as a player, I've probably been in that situation where I've had DMs, and I know that you know this for a fact, John, because you've had to do it when I was a player, where we've had like we've kind of got too involved in like our own conversations, and we need to maybe be brought back to the game. I've had a few instances where, as a player, that's happened, but I've never had it when I was DMing.
And I do believe that you guys are correct that it's something that kind of surfaces more
Hmm.
online than in person,
Yeah.
because in person you've always got the non-verbal communication aspect.
Yeah, I think as well that there's just a little bit more accountability in person as well, right? Because if I say something online and you get horrifically offended, I just go, all right, and disconnect from the call. you know. Um, Whereas in person, if I say something and you're horrifically offended, it could escalate.
Yeah.
And I can't exactly just go no and walk away, because then it will escalate. So I think
Yeah,
that
and
maybe plays an element in it as well.
I think it's also a lot to do with what you were saying earlier about your group. Like people
Yeah.
will tend to do the same things, or tend to have the same rough boundaries. So even
Yeah.
if not everyone's going for the goblin's eyes, the fact that one person is kind of indicates that everyone's okay with this in the abstract.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for them to be like, dude, would you stop that? Because presumably this isn't the first time that person's done that.
Yeah, I think I'm fortunate enough that the table that I play with a lot of times is kind of self-regulating. So
I know particular rat folk that would beg to differ.
well, that serves him right for showing up to one adventure and then just staying at the bar going, you know what? No, fuck you guys.
I mean, entirely valid.
But yeah, I don't believe that there has to be a line per se. I think it's an ongoing aspect of being a GM.
I think as well, it's not even just that. It's one of those, well, it's a moving target in all situations, because it's the same as like when you're out for the night, right? Where do you draw the line having a conversation with the group of people that you've met at the pub? it's the same. You just kind of you feel it out. It's social cues, right?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And on the other side, I mean, we're giving examples of awful players.
Yeah.
This this was not an awful GM, but I was once in a game this many years ago when I was in Scotland where somebody was like really reticent to go off the pre-established written material, and he wanted to say, "Come on, guys, get back on." And I and everyone else were just like, "No, no, we're not doing that," because he'd got this tiny little side mission thing, not an adventure, just basically a scene where there's a couple of evil demons trapped in the pot. You need to kill them. So the idea is you bash open the pot, and there's like an on-the-spot combat encounter. So what I said is, can I find a dried out well or some other very deep hole? And I confirmed these little demons don't have any wings. So then I went, okay, so we'll just drop it down the hole. The pot smashes, out they come, and now I've got an ability which does, infinite uses 1d4 damage to creatures of evil alignment only. It's the world's worst ability. It's pointless, but then I just said, I'm just going to stand at the top for like
You were
3
shooting
hours.
demons in a barrel.
And the GM's like, what? No, you've just cheated the encounter. That's totally, you can't do that. And I was like, yes, I can.
Oh, do you know what that reminds me of as well, John? That story that Scott told us of one of his players back in South Africa. You know, when Scott had this huge encounter plan for when they opened the door. And it was like, it all triggered off of the guy opening this door. And he opened the door, saw this huge demon like coming through a portal, just went, yeah, I closed the door, and just walked away. And like Scott was just like, all right, I guess I'll see you guys next week.
I mean, that's the sort of shit that has to be rewarded in some
absolutely,
way,
man. Absolutely.
No, where you just sat there in front of all your notes and just go, well, fuck.
Well, I mean, and I know this is something that we don't talk an awful lot about because neither of us really watch it, but there was a great example of that on Critical Role where Matt Mercer had planned out this entire like ship-to-ship combat. He'd come up with like ship mechanics for like, how they sail and fight and all this sort of thing. And then like as the enemy ship got closer, they just like, I think they cast like control water or something, and they just created a huge wave and just like shipwrecked the other ship on the shore. And he was like, well, that's like 6 months of prep down the drain. Cheers for that, guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened to me where I've had an entire city built up and an adventure in the city, and they just fucking walked straight past it. So, are you guys stopping it?
No.
Well, fuck.
But there's a really nice tavern. Like,
So I just basically moved the city to another place. Went, oh, look.
Oh, look, there's that same city.
No, I basically filed off the serial number.
Did I say Glasgow? I meant Lasco.
Yes, it's Glasgow. It's nothing to do with Glasgow. It's completely different.
Yeah, it looks pretty much the same. Nope,
different.
How do they know? You never went in. Can't possibly look the same.
That gate looks the same. They bought it from the same gate company.
Gates are us. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's everything. I think that's about all we've got time for today. Mime, would you like to just tell the listeners where they can find you and where they can kind of learn more about Bind and learn more about the sort of fantastic stuff you do?
For just getting a copy of the game, there's... Oh, I forgot to mention itch. There's a bindrpg.itch.io if you're fond of itch.io. And there's ttrpgs.com if you want a copy of Bind, or very long rants with lots of spreadsheets and maths and nonsense. And if you know what Git means in the software sense, then head along to gitlab.com/bindrpg or just Google it. I think I'm somewhere in the Google rankings.
You came up at like number 1.
Good stuff. I think I'm in there with RPG. I probably won't be there with just Bind. I think that you'll get some networking settings or something.
Yes, you do.
And of course, Malin at dice.camp. And in general, if you're on Mastodon, say hello and be on Mastodon because it's a whole lot nicer and more friendly than the weird things that people are doing with the algorithms over on Threads and Twitter.
I could not agree more. I am so happy I found Mastodon. So, Justin, do you want to tell people where they can find you on the
Yes.
interwebs?
So you can find me at Justin Accurate TV, pretty much all socials, and of course here and on our Facebook group.
Yeah, do join the Facebook group. We are trying to grow this community. We're trying to build something, and everybody who is on there and everybody who listens, you're all part of this. And
whether you like it or not.
Yeah, it's too late now. In respect to myself, you can find me on most of the socials, but I'm mostly active on Mastodon. I think Twitter and Threads is just something I've got at this point.
Good stuff. Good man.
But yeah, thank you, Marlin, for joining us and
absolutely
just blowing us away with the fantastic work you're doing. Keep it up, man.
Thank you very much for having me and doing all this research. When you said you'd seen things, I had no idea what you saw, but yeah, that's a lot of videos and everything. Very thorough.
It was fascinating. It was, and I'm not just saying that. It was truly, truly fascinating. Thank you to Sci-Fi and Couch for sending in some fantastic questions.
Yes.
And most importantly, thank you to everyone who takes time out of their busy day to listen to two idiots, and in this case, one not idiot, just talk about tabletop role-playing games. So with that, thank you very much, everyone.
See you later, folks.
Yeah.